Fintech Chatter, brought to you by Tier 1 People, leaders in fintech executive search. Welcome to Fintech Chatter, the show where I connect with fintech leaders and share their stories and insights on leading, hiring, raising capital, scaling the business, and of course a bit of chat. I'm your host, Dexter Cousins, and in 2022, we're showcasing Australia's next wave of fintech entrepreneurs. You can show your support by watching Fintech Chatter TV on YouTube and hitting subscribe and like, or if you prefer podcasts, please leave us a 5-star review. It really helps in promoting the show to others in the fintech community. Now, here's a few words from today's guest.
Hi, I'm David.
I'm Ethan.
And we're from Fundabl, the funding solution with no dilution. Effectively, we're here to help founders grow their business and scale. If they have subscription revenue, we help you turn your monthly recurring revenue into an upfront annual advance to grow your business.
Yep, so effectively we monetize a business's recurring revenue contracts and provide up to 12 months of their revenue upfront instead of waiting to receive it either weekly or monthly. We convert a business's MRR into ARR on attractive terms, so there's no other hidden fees.
Our capital is fast. We can get your money into your hands within the week, sometimes in as little as 48 hours.
Welcome to the show, chaps.
Thanks for having us.
Great to be here.
I'm really pleased to have you because what's been really interesting since we started showcasing this next wave of Aussie kind of fintechs is it's becoming really apparent that many are deciding to move away from the traditional funding model of coming up with an idea, putting together a pitch deck, and then going and trying to raise capital from VC, high net worth investors. So would you be able to, David, share with us a little bit more about this problem that you're solving?
Absolutely. I mean, as I think you've covered it a little bit in your intro, but that's really it. When you're starting out a business or when you're growing a business, you need to raise capital to keep going. And as a result, you often have to give away parts of your business in return. And I think there's definitely a place for that. I think VC is a very important part of the ecosystem. They bring a lot of contacts and information and help and support to founders. But I don't think raising capital every single time should involve giving up a piece of your business. That's very, very expensive and problematic depending on where you are. So we believe that the problem that needs to be solved is having additional funding opportunities for founders and business owners to grow their businesses without having to dilute. So we're the funding solution with no dilution, there to be something alongside your other capital options when you're growing and getting some success, and you just need a little bit more runway or some capital for the future.
I'm just hearing the radio jingle now, the funding solution with no dilution. Genius. Ethan, how did you come up with the idea? What's the background to it?
Yeah, well, Dexter, there was two main sources of inspiration. So in my previous role, I sat on the investment committee looking at early stage investment opportunities. And I remember it was a rainy Tuesday afternoon, and two founders had come to our offices, and they were obviously looking to raise capital, and they were raising capital but looking to give away 45% of its business. And albeit I was sitting on the other side of the table, I felt sorry for these founders because without this capital injection, they probably wouldn't have been able to keep on doing its business. They didn't have any sort of track record, or they weren't profitable, of course, and they couldn't secure bank debts or any sort of funding on attractive terms. So it was the all equity route, or unfortunately, it was closing up shop. So I kept on thinking that there had to be a more founder-friendly funding solution for these businesses. And so the second source of inspiration was I had actually told my previous employers that I was resigning to work on another business idea. So I took some time off and I actually went up the coast. And whilst I was working on the business idea, which is completely different to Fundabls in the influencer marketer space, I had a personal investment in a software business that had just declared that they were looking to raise equity funds, which was a little bit disappointing because they weren't able to control their cash burn, and they were raising prior to when they had forecast, which resulted in myself been further diluted, and obviously they didn't hit their milestones to attract that valuation that they were heading towards. So I thought to myself, this business, they've got contracts with the likes of AXA, Microsoft, Brookfield, these large conglomerates 3-5 years out, that it doesn't seem like they're going anywhere. What if you're able to bring forward some of those contracts, extend this business's cash runway, improve its recurring revenues, raise at a high valuation and get less diluted, and everyone's very happy. So I guess, there was a few reasons for starting up Fundabl, but it was definitely a staged event.
So having been in, kind of own businesses and small businesses for, I think, 2.5 decades now, I remember we used to have invoice factoring, which was, you had an invoice, you'd kind of sell that to the bank, they'd take a proportion of that and you'd get the money up front. How is Fundabl different to, say, invoice factoring?
It's a great question. I think there are a couple of key points in invoice factoring that are a little different in our model. The first is when you're invoice factoring, you've already provided the service and you build the customer to pay you for it. So it's effectively a debt that's owing, and you can then factor it by selling it to someone else and saying, hey, give me money up front, and then you can collect from this party when they eventually pay. But there's no concern that the services have been delivered and someone owes you money for something they've bought. In our case, what we're actually saying is, if you have subscription revenue from your customers, we believe that if we look at the metrics of your business, we can determine how sticky that revenue is.
Right.
And so we might be saying, we will fund you against subscription revenue that we expect in the future based on your track record and your performance, but it's not actually guaranteed. So your customers can cancel on a month-to-month basis, but we'll actually fund you on the assumption that they actually won't, because it's so sticky.
So then I guess the kind of type of customer startup that you're aiming for is somebody that has a product that's out there generating revenue that customers are using.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
If there's nothing for us to have a look at and get comfortable, it's a little bit early. What we want to see is that you've got product market fit and a bit of traction. Customers are buying your product and they like it. And then we can then extrapolate and say, this is a great product and a great team. People are going to continue to buy it and really going to stay with you for the journey.
Awesome. So how did you guys get together?
That's a great story. There's a great story to it. So
there always is.
Yeah, there's always is. Yeah. So a best friend of mine, he actually used to work for Dave, and I remember one afternoon him giving me a call and saying, "Hey, Ethan, you wouldn't quite believe it, but my boss, he's actually looking for something earlier staged. He's a reputable guy. He's a lovely guy." And it's worth giving him a shout.
And then he introduced you to David, eh?
To David.
And he was a bit disappointed, but it was too late.
And I guess the rest is history. So it always seems to work out that way.
So where's Fundabl at now? How long's the business been going, and how many people have you got in the business?
Yeah, well, Ethan's idea was about a year ago. But I think as you can hear, he percolated on it, and there was a bit of sort of thinking and refining before I think he was ready that this is now sort of germinated into a kernel of an idea.
Yeah.
I joined up with Ethan when I left my previous role, and we launched the business 6 months ago officially. And we spent the first couple of months just getting our process and our product refined, and also decided we needed to raise capital. We wanted to be in a position that when we opened the doors, we could deliver for customers. If they wanted funding, we wanted to be there to support them. So we spent the first 3 months, back end of last year, getting that in place, raised capital from EG funds. And so now we're in a position where we've launched the business and we're officially out there, supporting customers. So we've got our first pioneer customers. They're all sort of going really well. One of our favorite stories is a customer we funded in February and doubled revenues in March on the back of some of the expansion that they did. So that makes us feel really great about what we're actually doing.
Yeah, it's a validation then for the model.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. So I guess, it's early days, but what would you say have been some of the kind of biggest challenges that you've faced so far in getting Fundabl off the ground?
I'll start, and maybe you can talk a bit about, the product itself. But, one of the big challenges is track record in all things. We're looking for track record in our clients to make sure we can fund them. And equally, stakeholders of our business are looking for track record in us. And that always creates this catch-22. Yeah. People say to you, we're very excited. We want to get on board. How have you been doing? And we sort of say, well, we're getting started. This is what's going to happen. And there's always that challenge with the imagination. If will it actually happen? So that was a big challenge of, getting off the ground. People had to have faith in us that this would work. And it's a novel product and it wasn't really functioning in Australia this way.
Well, I guess, and this is again one of the kind of great things about the podcast is going back to early stage startups as we're kind of back to innovation, doing things that haven't been done before. How did you, Ethan, get people to invest in yourselves and sell the vision? Did you go to a particular type of investor, or like did you just how did you go about doing that?
Yeah, so we were very focused on getting the right strategic investor on board that can help us not just from a potential capital standpoint, from a longevity piece, but also being able to actively support, whether that be through introductions, a platform in terms of in-house resourcing. So the process took a little bit longer than we anticipated. It always does cost more and takes longer than you budget for. But we're very excited to have EG Funds as our cornerstone investor. They're incredibly value aligned, and they also add a lot of intrinsic value to the business alongside the capital that they've provided.
And as you've kind of got the capital, challenges around getting customers, how have you gone about doing that?
From the capital standpoint, I guess as any fintech, there's always a challenge in terms of raising too much and too little and being able to support. And we're also a startup ourselves, so we also go through those capital challenges. I wish we could Fundabl our capital, but unfortunately we don't have that nature to our revenue stream. In terms of the client side of things, been incredibly receptive. I guess when we do meet with clients, generally the answer is we get it, we understand the needs. We'd love to onboard. There's no cost or commitment to onboard with us. Effectively, we provide them with a trading limit that they can utilize for their business when that falls due. So they've been very receptive to the idea. The other response we're generally getting is, get the idea, love the model. Not quite for us at this moment, but would love to touch base in a couple months' time when we're looking for a little bit more of a funding source to bolster distribution efforts or to extend runway, or they're heading towards a capital raise and they want to hit their milestones.
That's a great thing about our product is fundamentally we're approaching clients to say, we're offering you something that is actually a solution for you. And that's when they come back to us and say either not now or yes, please.
Yeah.
And so we don't actually have any negative responses where people say, we would never want that or we don't like that. It's sometimes just we've got a lot of capital raised already or almost profitable, so maybe in the future. So that's really great for us because we know that we'll be able to help them along their journey throughout. The other thing is obviously the startup and growth community in Australia is really, really close. And so as long as you have the customer at heart and really trying to do the right thing at all times, there's a lot of positive externalities in the community to bring clients to us that sort of make that match for us.
What was that moment like when you got your first client?
Magical.
It was magical, seriously. Incredibly rewarding as well. As Dave mentioned, I mean, one of our initial pioneer clients, they've managed to double their revenues in the space of 1 month of accepting our funding source. So I guess we're a team of very passionate supporters of the Australian tech ecosystem. And it's incredibly rewarding to see already some of the success stories and looking forward to growing with our clients.
But I'm sure like all things, that moment when you take the theory and the practice into reality is just so unbelievably cool because, you talk about it ad nauseum, days, nights, weekends. This should work. People should want it. This is how it will happen. And then when it actually does happen, it's like a little bit surprising, but also euphoria. Just, amazing.
And look, I think one of the things that I really like about what you're doing and how you're going about this is very much the kind of lean startup approach to just get the product out into the hands of customers and let them validate your idea rather than, surveys and all this other stuff that people just tell you what you want to hear, right?
That's exactly right. I mean, we can go out and blow the bugle about how great our product is, but if our client can say that for themselves, then it's yeah, that's the best validation you can really give.
But that's, you have to, it's a very sort of common saying out there these days. It's almost a cliche, but if you're not embarrassed about version 1.0 of your product, you're probably too late. I think we definitely subscribe to that thinking. The reality is our product does have the features we think resonate. And at the end of the day, customers are going to tell us what they like and don't like. And it's up to us to then quickly adapt and make sure that we refine our product.
So you guys first-time founders, or have you had a stab at being a founder in the past?
I'm a first-time founder.
This is my second sort of official go around. My previous role was at a non-bank lender called Credible.
Right.
And I was there at the beginning when we started up that business. That was also a niche-focused capital solution, actually, to the medical profession. And so I learned a lot about how to focus narrowly on making sure that your product fits your clientele. And obviously, customer service is at the heart of it.
Yeah.
A lot of people said to us, how will you compete with other more established options out there? And the reality is, as long as you look after your client at all times, that really is a big competitive advantage.
Yeah. What advice have you got for first-time founders? I guess, look, you've done it now, right? So you kind of you're one of the very few that now are kind of legitimately can provide advice. What would you say is the thing that you've learned the most on this journey so far, Ethan?
I probably have two pieces of advice for founders. One being there's generally a more optimal capital stack for your business. I think the all equity funding route is very much past our days. And firstly, in terms of raising an alternative funding source and maintaining your equity is also providing a vote of confidence, not just for your investors, but also for your internal stakeholders, employees, that you'll be there for the long run, and you won't lose your incentive and you won't lose control of your business and just become an employee themselves. Another piece of advice I generally give to founders is that not to be too fixated on the valuation, but choose the capital source that will best support your business and will grow with you. I guess how we provide our funding source to our clients is we're very much in it to grow with our clients. As they grow, we want to grow with them and increase their limits and increase their funding opportunities through Fundabl. So not to be too fixated on the valuation, choose the preferred capital partner that you can grow with.
Yeah. And David, what advice have you got for other founders that are, or people that are thinking about going out and launching their own startup?
There's so many considerations, but I think a really important thing that helps me is to think about it as a marathon and not a sprint. Like Ethan said, if you think short term or wins and losses, it's very easy to lose sight of whether you're actually succeeding. So I think having the stamina and to try and stay balanced through the very volatile ride you're going to go on is really important. I think the highs are really high. The lows can be much lower than normal traditional style corporate jobs where there's a lot more stability. So I think being able to take those sort of knocks on the chin with perspective and understanding it's all part of the process really, really helps you have that stamina to get to the other side.
Now, Ethan, we were at the Fintech Australia meetup last night. I think I got asked about 8 times by people if I could help them hire and find developers and engineers.
Yeah.
It's not our thing, or customer success managers or whatever. It's not our thing. But obviously, the challenge for talent is a real one. How is Fundabl gone about bringing in the caliber of people that absolutely essential to get something like this off the ground and become successçful?
Firstly, how cool was that catch up last night?
Yeah, it was really nice
to finally all be in person
see,
and meet face to face rather than these Zooms and Teams calls. I think we've all had enough of that.
Yeah.
But definitely agree. There's definitely a tech crunch out there. In terms of how we generally approach our talents and what we look for when we do look to hire, it's definitely looking for individuals that are hungry, humble, and people smarts. We're also working in a very fast-paced and agile space. So looking for individuals that relish the challenge, the uncertainty of building something that's great, and being in it for the long run and is able to execute in those difficult times.
Now, of course, if you ask anybody whether they relish a challenge, I don't think I've ever met anybody who turns around and says no, right? How do you assess, David, people who actually have those qualities versus thinking that they have them or just stating that they have them?
It's a really great question. I think we really have moved away from the concept of show us your resume, tick boxes on experience, and then try and extrapolate that into our business. The way we've sort of done it is, first of all, we want to get to know you. So we try and spend time with potential candidates outside of the office, sometimes outside of business.
Yeah.
We've caught up with people over lunch. We've caught up with them over sporting events. And basically, that's a natural environment where you can get some of that sort of authenticity. The other thing that we try and do is we're sort of quite good about it, I think, in terms of the continuum. I think we know there's certain confidential things in our business, but at the end of the day, our product isn't supposed to be a secret. So we've oftentimes said to people, if you're interested in potentially working with Fundabl, come hang out with us.
Yeah.
We're an authentic group of people. Come spend time in the office, look at what we're doing, show up at some of the events we go to and see what we do. And that allows us almost to try it before you buy it for both sides. Yeah. People then can know exactly what they're potentially interviewing for, and we can get a flavor for, does this person fit culturally? Do they really relish the challenge, like you said? And do they come alive in the various environments we find ourselves in?
But I actually had this very same discussion maybe about 3 weeks back. UK DIT invited me to a breakfast. They had leaders, fintech leaders from the UK, Australia, and talent was the number one discussion. And they asked my opinion, was a kind of talent expert there. And I basically said exactly what you've just said there, David, which is, the process that most businesses have for hiring was developed over 100 years ago in the Great Depression, when you had literally lines a mile long of people with resumes begging for a job. And we still have the same process, right? There is not a mile of people begging for a job out there. And I used the analogy of a date, right? Imagine going on a date and somebody sat there with a clipboard saying, can you give me an example of when you've split up with someone? How have you dealt with how have you dealt when you found somebody's been cheating with you?
Would you ever cheat?
Yeah, exactly. And then how much money do you earn? Can I have the names and numbers of two of your exes? And by the way, if I'm interested, we'll do this again. I'll bring along a mate and we'll ask the same questions. And then after that, we'll move in together. You'd be like, you wouldn't be going on the second date, right? So what you've said there about that process, I absolutely, I've been saying this for the last 5 years. It has to be this almost kind of courtship,
absolutely,
relationship. That's what you're entering into, is a relationship, right? And the strength of an organization is the strength of its relationships.
And that point on relationships is a really applicable one for our stage of the business. It's a really intimate relationship. There's a huge reliance on the core team, on each other to make things happen. It isn't a case of a big organization where there's layers of support and backup if somebody sort of isn't able. And so for us, that is this absolute trust that almost transcends just getting a task done, that we need to have absolute confidence in each other.
And I think you've kind of touched there on the reason why most people fail when they move from a corporate straight to a startup is there's layers of protection on there. There's nowhere to hide. And you're going to make a lot of mistakes. Absolutely. And unfortunately, in a big corporate, when you make a mistake, right, your kind of badge gets marked. You don't get the promotion, you don't get the bonus. So your natural instinct is to either hide it or blame someone else, right? And I think you get very, very good people come into the environment of a startup, and it's too much. It's too much. And I think it's often a case of the right person, just the wrong time of the business.
That's exactly right. I think everybody, like you said, the answer is yes. Do you like risk? Do you like uncertainty? Do you like a challenge? Yes. Yeah. But when you actually feel what that feels like, when you look around and there's nobody with the answer, I think that's a real big realization.
I mean, I'm sure there's been times for you, Ethan, where you've thought, what have I got myself into?
Yeah, well, welcome to the land of startups. It's an absolute roller coaster, as Dave said. You have your highs, and it's this feeling of euphoria, but your lows they're tough. But you have to think that there's a much more longer term play, and it's riding the wave.
When you look at kind of culture and values, you talked there about your investors earlier and them sharing the same values. What are the things that are important to you in your organization and the things that and the behaviors that you really value?
Yeah, well, definitely, based on what we've been speaking already, relationships really matter to us. They matter most. And I think it's definitely a value that we instill within the culture is coming to work with a feeling of purpose and wanting to do something greater than yourself, and hopefully, supporting the ecosystem, supporting each other, and also a culture of having fun, just in general.
Yeah.
There's a lot of ping pong and good fun in the office. So from a value perspective, it's all about relationships, whether that be with our clients, whether that be with each other, with our partners, with our investors. Relationships really sit at our core.
And what are the important things for you, David?
I think that in addition to what Ethan sort of touched on, I think integrity and support are sort of two concepts that are really important culturally for us. So integrity is a really personal thing. People interpret that different ways.
Yeah.
So I think what integrity means for Fundabl needs to be coherent and consistent. And I think that's really important because we're dealing with finances and money. We're getting very, very sensitive data from our clients on their business. They're really trusting us with a really important decision in their own business. And equally for us, everybody who's in the business is, effectively has their hands on the till and the keys. So we need to believe that everyone, if you ask them the same question about sort of ethics and behavior, would answer it the same way if we're in a different room. One of the things I learned when I was at business school from a really, really great entrepreneurial professor, he said, there's sort of three questions that you need to have here. And when you get into business with someone, it's not important what the answer to the question is. It's just that you would answer it the same way. And one of the things, his first question I remember was an amazing question. He said, you're at a big corporate, you're in charge of the money, and you've just been paid by a really, really big client. Let's call it, Apple or GM. And they've paid you $100,382. And you know that that's for a specific invoice because it's such a specific amount. And 3 days later, you get another $100,000, 382. And you know that they've double paid you. You also know it's a small amount, and you know that nobody will ever know because they're a huge organization, you're a huge organization, and you've been double paid. But what this will mean is that your business is going to hit some milestones, people will get bonuses, and it'll be a great outcome. What do you do? And everyone was like, oh, well, of course you need to return the money. And he said, it's not about what you think is the right answer. It's just that if what you would do is the same as what your partner or your other colleagues would do, you're in a culturally aligned place.
Yeah.
And so I think we all know what the correct answer we think is for that question, but it's those kind of things that you can really come to see that you're with people who are heading in the same direction as you.
Yeah, I've got to stop myself here because we're going to go down a rabbit hole, right? Because I absolutely agree. And I think, there's even a lot of scientific research out there that will show that if you get people who will say, yeah, that's how I am integrity-wise, once they see one person get away with it,
It's unravels very quickly.
Yeah, and I think it's such a powerful kind of lesson on leadership is that whatever the CEO kind of tolerates, the leadership tolerates, determines the culture,
Absolutely.
not the words that you've said and the values. So I think that's an absolutely incredible example. I think it's,
and look, for me, putting it into actual practice, the moment that I knew that Ethan and I had that alignment and we could therefore instill it in our organization was Ethan showed up to one of our earlier meetings. He was a little bit frazzled. I said, what's going on? He said, well, I was driving along on the way here and I clipped somebody's side mirror. And, that was very upsetting. So I said, oh, well, what did you do? He said, well, I got out the car and I looked at the side mirror really carefully. I looked at my side mirror and I couldn't see a scratch. And I was like, oh, that's very lucky. That's wonderful. And he said, yeah, but I just, I was in a hurry and I wasn't sure. So I wrote my name and put it on the guy's windscreen and just said, here's my number. I've hit your mirror. I don't see any issues, but if there is, please call me and we'll sort it out. And the guy actually called him and said, thank you so much for being honest. Let's have a beer. But in that moment, I'm hearing from someone who's chosen to do the right thing with no requirement. The universe and the world would never know otherwise, much like that example I gave earlier. And that for me was putting into practice, here's a person whose integrity aligns with my own and I can trust.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, we were talking about ecosystem very briefly, but I want to talk about that a bit more. And there's a couple of things that I want to kind of cover, which is, first of all, as I mentioned, we're showcasing earlier stage startups on the podcast this year. What's been really refreshing for me is if I think back to last year, pretty much everybody who wanted to be on the podcast was doing another BNPL, BNPL for recruitment fees, BNPL for home loans, which I thought were mortgages, but it was just I couldn't take it anymore. And yeah, what's been really refreshing to go back to kind of real early stage startups has been, that kind of return to innovation, right? Where we were with Afterpay and Zip 5-6 years ago. What was really kind of, and you guys are an example of this. What I'm really excited about is how now we're finally having the kind of credit models tipped upside down, and it's creating new products. Because in fintech, we've not really seen new products. Seen a lot of kind of innovation to make things faster, slicker, cheaper to deliver, but we haven't really seen new products. What's your sense, first of all, Ethan, as to where you think we're at here in Australia with in terms of innovation?
I might ask Dave if you want to.
Yeah, look, I think in terms of innovation, I think there's a lot of innovation in the startup community. If we sort of move it straight into fintech and sort of apply it to our space, there's a lot of innovation as well. But I moved here from the States where I was living previously, and I remember being struck, this was 10 years ago, with there's a lot going on, a lot of parallels here in Australia, but some of the things just felt a little bit behind where I just come from. And then I started to see things like Afterpay and Zip and see people bringing models that weren't essentially brand new. I mean, I heard about it all the time. It's just lay-by. Yeah. But at the end of the day, it was innovative because of the way they applied a concept. Yeah. And I think that's now really starting to happen in a more structured way. Like you said, instead of just saying, oh, well, BNPL is great, let's BNPL something else, people are looking and saying, what isn't being done well? Is there a whole group or an industry that's being left behind or underserved? And how can we do that better? And I think that's now really starting to happen in a big way. I think there is still a bit of a lag, some of the other markets, but that's really great to see. Yeah.
I think what kind of excites me about the approach that you guys have got, and I think we're going to start to see this apply to things like home loans. I mean, particularly for consumer debt, where we can't rely now on people having a job for life, and people are working 4 days a week, 3 days a week. People are doing 6-month stints somewhere. People are having their own business. People are going out and being influencers. Yet the credit models are all based on somebody having a regular job and a regular income. What I really like about your model is you've gone, hey, we're going to look at the propensity to fulfill the kind of the debt, right? And looking forward rather than looking historically. How have you gone about doing that? Because obviously that then requires a different model. That requires, I'm assuming, you're going to have to get access to data that, isn't just with a credit agency. How do you go about doing that?
Yeah, well, you're right. Effectively, we're creating a new asset class. Yeah. It's a fixed income-like product that's effectively securitized off the back of a recurring nature to a revenue stream. In terms of our credit engine in the background, we're looking at a variety of metrics to be able to underwrite our clients. It's interesting you say, as in we're taking it. The actual model itself, it's nascent. However, it's still applying similar sort of practices that have been used for many other types of business. So if you're looking to underwrite a software business, as an example, there's generally your 15, 20 odd metrics that you would use to look at a SaaS business that we're, of course, using. But I think it's applying a different sort of mindsets to looking at these sort of businesses rather than those that are heading towards the ground, but rather they've got the ability to really grow and scale.
I think your point is right. It's certain other credit models said you need to have a job for life, and then we just look at 3 paychecks and extrapolate that. And then that really worked for a long time because that's how the world functioned. We're not sort of saying don't have a paycheck now and we'll still lend to you. We're saying, like you said, maybe that paycheck or that income stream looks different, but is actually in the same risk band as what we used to think something else was. So that's what we sort of looked at. We said a recurring revenue stream from clients that are very creditworthy with a sticky product has inherent value. And we can try and look at metrics around that and say, are we going to be able to advance capital against this in a safe way? And so what is required is looking at traditional methods of calculating things, but applying different weightings and different value on performance according to our understanding of what a good business in our space looks like. And I think, like you said, a lot of the traditional models out there haven't been updated for how businesses today look and feel. And so there's a vast swath of companies out there that don't look safe. But in actual fact, if you really dig in, you can see there are ways to provide credit in a way that isn't going to blow everyone up.
And as you pointed out, right, you could have AI doing that same thing, but without the context, it then becomes really dangerous, right? Because
absolutely, it does what you tell it to do, right? So at some point, someone's got to say, what do we want it to look at and what do we want it to tell us based on what it finds? And because ours is new, we're effectively looking at it and saying, instead of looking at 3 paychecks and extrapolating out, look at this revenue contract, find these other items, and then extrapolate that. So there's a lot of sort of investment from our perspective in understanding the types of clients we're doing to make sure we can sort of tweak it to be accurate.
So Ethan, other than the free return to free pizza and beer, what's got you excited about the Aussie fintech scene right now?
Well, there's definitely been some incredible businesses out there that are definitely taking a stance on it within the ecosystem. But I might just share one business that's definitely, well, 2 businesses that have definitely caught my attention and got me the most excited, which you might think is quite humorous in a way, which is Pipe and Capchase Overseas, which have very similar models to us. But it's been quite exciting on our end to just see the take up that's been taken up by businesses in those US markets. So Pipe, as an example, they've already onboarded 8,000 odds clients onto its platform. They were the fastest growing fintech globally to hit unicorn status. So for us, it's very much proved a point that we've always known, that is, recurring contracts are very valuable and that they should be tradable. And it's provided us with validation that what we're working towards is very exciting, as Australia generally, albeit a smaller market, it works in tandem to overseas markets, which is very encouraging for us.
What about yourself, David? What's got you excited right now?
I think the ecosystem around us developing rapidly is also really exciting. So, when we looked at setting up our business, we looked at traditional models of providing a financial product and said, well, what do you need? And the reality is now there's so many great fintechs all around different problems that can actually work with us and help us. So, for example, when we looked at our compliance function and said to ourselves, how are we going to make sure we do this correctly? Before, you might have thought, do I have someone with the compliance expertise, or who's going to read the regulations? Now there are fintechs that are amazing at actually helping us do what we need to do from a compliance perspective. And instead of needing to go and sort of upskill ourselves in something that's not our core skill set, we're able to work with them, partner with them, and sort of work that way. And that extends beyond just compliance. It's the way our payments work, the way our capital flows. We're dealing with a number of service providers who themselves are fintechs, growing on the same kind of space as us. And it's really, really nice to see that we're all kind of symbiotic. They're supporting credit providers, and we're one of their customers. And the most rewarding about it all is sometimes it almost flips on its head. We go to them and say, hey, we need some help with whether it's compliance or payments or whatever. Can you explain your product? We understand their product better. We become a client of theirs. Then we realize actually we're providing them with recurring income. And so, the most recent, the virtuous circle, Ethan turned around to one of our service providers and said, hey, you guys look like you're growing really fast and you've got a lot of recurring revenue. We know we're not going anywhere. We think your product's great. Do you need any funding? And they've turned around and said, well, what do you mean? And so, some of our earliest clients were actually catch-ups around just networking or us buying their product. And they turned into customers where they said to us, actually, we're thinking of raising. Maybe we could get some Fundabl product. And they hadn't thought about it until we engaged. And that's really exciting. Ways to work together by just, solving similar problems in a similar space.
That's fantastic. Really fantastic. And what I love about it is small businesses can have a big impact. And we're starting to see now the network effects of technology being the leveler, right? And those people who, have a great idea and are willing, and committed to executing on it will be successful, right? Like I think we're actually going to see a massive, if the stats are 9 out of 10 startups fail, I think we're going to see that number shrink.
Absolutely. I said the same thing to Ethan the other day. I said, the reality is that stat probably includes periods from before where people had a great idea, had great traction, had great skills, but ran into parts of their process or their growth that they didn't have those skills for, and it was people solved.
Yeah.
And so if you couldn't find people to come and help you solve that problem, your business was in trouble.
Yeah.
Whereas now, if you just understand technology and embrace what's out there, oftentimes you can create a solution that's a bit of a hybrid.
Awesome. Where can people find out more about Fundabl?
Well, you can head on to our website, fundabl.com. Would also...
That's show the T-shirts that no E.
No E.
Yeah.
That's right. Well, actually, this is relatively old merch, and in about 2 weeks or so we'll be rebranding, which is very exciting.
But otherwise, I'd encourage people to, get in touch with us. Ethan in particular is always available. Ethan at fundabl.com or, give him a ring. We'd love to talk about the business to anyone who's interested, whether that's a customer, a partner, or stakeholder. And we're so passionate about it. We're available at any time. So that's always a nice way to engage.
Cool. And look, we have some seriously talented people listen to this show as well who never know might be interested in joining something like Fundabl. What's the best way for people to reach out to you?
Via email, LinkedIn, give me a call.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's pretty standard these days. We're hiring. So, we're always out there looking for talent, trying to engage with people, whether it's for roles that we have open now or in the future as we grow. So we're really excited to connect. And LinkedIn and email is a really good way to just get in touch with us through the website. We'd love to hear from you.
Awesome. Well, chaps, it's been great to have you on the show. Folks, show your support for Fundabl and all the other great startups that we're showcasing on FinTech Chatter by giving us a like and subscribe. Until the next show, stay safe. You can connect with me, Dexter Cousins, on LinkedIn and Twitter. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, remember to press follow on your favorite podcast player and please consider leaving us a review. It really does help me in bringing in great guests and help fintech fans like you discover the show. FinTech Chatter is presented by Tier 1 People, leaders in fintech executive search. We'll help you launch, scale, and innovate by delivering world-class talent. And you can find out more at tier1people.com.